Hi, it's me again. I know that I was supposed to come on sooner to carry on with my chapter 1 of the book that I'm writing. I'm speaking it actually, I'm videoing, taping it, and then I will get it changed into writing. And as I've said before, the book will be my story and the story of my grandparents on my mother's side, and whatever I know about my grandparents on my on my father's side, as well as myself and my husband. And this book, I'm doing it, I'm not going to publish it, it's just going to stay on my YouTube channel for anyone to look at, especially, hopefully, my grandchildren one day. Excuse me, it's always very good to know where you come from. So just to do a small summary of where we are at the moment with chapter 1, it's that there was no Turkish state. The Turks are not a people. There was the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire was in the east part of Asia. The western part of Asia was what was called Asia Minor, and it was Greeks. So a lot of times the people say that was the real Greece. I did speak about all the different towns that were part of Asia Minor, but I decided to not just use my own memories, but to actually also research. So I have found academic journal articles that I don't want to actually give reference to, because obviously it will be plagiarism. But I just wanted to make some things about the history of the Greeks of Asia Minor clear in my head before I carry on speaking about it. So yes, the Turks came from up past Caucasus and that. Turkmenistan, Turkestan, Kazakhstan, Boratstan. No, this is not funny. Really, I'm so sorry. That shouldn't have been there. Can't believe I did this in the middle of everything. Anyway, so my family came predominantly from Smyrna, which is now called Izmir, Vurla, which is still known as Vurla, excuse me, and my grandfather came from Ayvalik. Through the time, you will hear about other towns, and also towns that are deeper and more north in the part that was Asia Minor, where the Pontic people come from, Cappadocia and those places. So I am now at the time that the Turks have decided on a very, very gruesome cleansing of the Armenians and Greeks in that part, in the western part of Asia Minor, or Asia. And the so-called Greeks from mainland Greece had sent some soldiers to help the Greeks in Asia Minor from the Holocaust that was happening there. Needless to say, the Greeks betrayed the Greeks of Asia Minor, and I now found out that it's true what my grandmother said. They did reach up to a certain point, however, then started retreating, and as my grandmother said, they said nothing to the Greeks, landowners, wealthy people, poor people, whomever was there, or whoever actually, not whomever. They said nothing, they just left. So people were basically slaughtered. There is a Jewish-Polish historian that first coined the word Holocaust. And he said it about the Armenian genocide in Asia Minor, which my grandmother remembers, and so does my grandfather. My grandfather came from west, but right near the coast, in a place called Ayvali. It is now called Ayvalik. It was also called Kidonia. And my granny had told me that when they were hearing all the stories about the Armenian genocide, she remembers the Turkish and Bosnian servants coming up to the house and saying that the river that runs past the vineyards, etc., was red from the blood of the Armenians. There was 1 million Armenians killed. Actually killed. There were still hundreds of thousands that was taken on death marches back and forth in those areas which were Greek, but the Turks were starting to take over. The amount registered, but this is not a proper registration of Greeks annihilated and killed, was 700,000. I spoke about my grandparents being taken to the death marches, my granny losing her first child by a little Turkish boy standing on the back of a slipper and the baby falling out her hands. And my grandfather was in hard labor, wherein 3 times he was set up to be hung. He was going to be hung. And they said to him, as they told all the Greeks in that whole part of Asia, if you change and become Mohammedans, Muslims, you will be fine, but you will lose everything that's yours. And as you heard, both Armenians and Greeks said no. And there were also some Assyrians, and I don't want to lie, okay, I could, I would have to actually look at the article to remember the other nationalities that were also involved. Basically, I'm sticking on the Greeks and Armenians. And by the way, the Greek ships, when they were leaving Smyrna, when the Greek people that lived in Smyrna realized what was happening, and they tried to get on the ships, after a while, the Greek sailors from mainland Greece were pushing the people away. So there were children that actually drowned They were looking for safety. You know, the world as it is today, in the year 2022, we are very politically correct, and as a practicing Christian, we are supposed to forgive people. However, I have been brought up, as most Greeks have, with an ingrained hate of the Turks. And as much, and I'm talking myself now, okay, I'm a nobody, I'm just a Greek old lady. From what I have heard since growing up, and I have now researched, I'm sorry, I can hate them if I want to. In any case, don't go anywhere, so nobody can force me to become politically correct. So, what happened with my great-grandmother, my granny and her sister? They went on this death march, which made them walk 200 kilometers up, back to the same place again, and then 300 kilometers, and then back to the same place, and then they did more kilometers, and then back to the same place. And there are actual reports of American women that were allowed to go in as nurses to help with this Holocaust, this senseless killing of ordinary men and women, that said that there were so many bodies of children, adults, old people, women, men, everything on the side of the roads where these death marches were going back and forth, that apparently it was something for like 300 or 400 kilometers you couldn't really breathe properly, because they just left everybody. And let us not forget that everybody was as they were the time they started the death march. So obviously, as the time went past, your clothes started getting worse, you didn't have food, you got thin, you got ill, all this was happening. Most of the time, they used a place called Aydin. On the one side of Aydin on the east was Nestle and Denizli. It was two towns. I think there were, I don't want to lie, I think there were 80 to 100 kilometers from Aydin, or from Smyrna. The women were sent there and back, and there and back, with no reason. Always with like, okay, just pick up stones on your way, obviously heavy things, and then walk and walk back, basically to get rid of people. So when my grandfather was taken into the interior of Asia Minor, hard labor, at a stage they also did a death march, and he met my grandmother again in Aydin. My granny used to call it Aydini. Aydini. It's Aydin. But not, it's an Aydin in Turkey. So, they met, they stayed together a very small time. They'd already got married when my granny, thank God, whilst the the Turks were coming towards Smyrna, my grandmother and grandfather got married without her father's, her father didn't say yes. Blessing is the word. So they got together for this time, and then my grandfather was lost, and finally the woman heard, the very few women that were left alive, and children, heard that there were some ships, excuse me, that have arrived in Smyrna to collect people as part of a treaty signed by the Allied powers, because everything was done by the big shots, America, Germany, Britain, all the same people causing problems the whole time. They kill everyone, those people. And Russia, of course. Anyway, at this time, as a matter of interest, while they were at Aydin, the one time, the people saw, and I think I've mentioned it before this in chapter 1, but it will go under the editing of it. They saw Mother Mary running on a horse and telling Christian, leave. Kemal is coming. His name was Mustafa Kemal. He was like the Hitler of the Turks. His whole goal in life and in his army life, and whoever he was one of the, what they were called, young Turks. Terrible, vicious people. He used to tell people, you're gonna have to torch the Greek towns and Greek cities like Smyrna. Torch them so that no one knows that there were ever Greeks here, and no Greeks in the years and centuries to come can come to Turkey and say it used to be Greece here. Much, by the way, it's the same as they've done to Istanbul. And one of my friends, Myrto, may her soul rest in peace, very good friend of mine. We lost her last year to COVID. But she must also be part of the story. When she went to Turkey recently, she says there were people reading, in Istanbul and everywhere they found ancient Greek things. And she was reading stuff in Greek, and then the people said to her, don't do it loudly, the Turks get upset. Even the Turkish guide. And that is 2020, maybe 2019, I don't want to lie. So he got his wish. There are now only 2,000 Greeks left around Istanbul. It is always a plus-minus amount of Greeks. And they're all around the ecumenical patriarchate. And as far as I know, there is an embassy in Ankara. I didn't go as far as now to know exactly what's happening with Greeks. That was part of what I read in that journal. So, my granny and her sister and her mother started walking. There were so few of them left by then that the Turks didn't give a hoot. And they went to Smyrna, and they got on an Italian ship. And they knew it was an Italian ship because, like I told you, my grandfather and grandmother came from very wealthy stock. And the girls were in the convent where they were taught in Italian, French, Greek, and Turkish. And my grandfather also. He wasn't in the convent. He was in the brothers. So they get on this boat, and now they're going to go to Athens. Excuse me. For some reason on their boat, they were on that and other boats that there wasn't only the one my granny was on. A lot of my grannies and some of my grandfather's family came. So they were all going to Athens. My grandmother thought that if I come to Athens, I will start looking for my husband. My grandfather said, when I get to Athens, I will start looking for my wife. My grandfather was taken to an island called Mytilene, Lesbos. And my granny, in that Italian ship with her mother and sister and some of her family, were taken to Kefalonia, and they were told that they are in Greece, meaning in Athens. Now these people, there was a little bit of silent movies in the 1920s. So they saw some temples on the hillside. I have never been to Kefalonia. They all got out. In any case, you're not going to say no. When the ship's captain is Italian and says goodbye, you get off. Right? Right. So they got off. And then my great-grandmother, her name was Maria, my mother had her name, Maria, Mary, suddenly saw people coming down the road wearing harem pants and yashmaks. So they said, but this can't be Athens. Why are these women coming dressed like Turks down? So my great-granny went up and asked, where are we? Why are you allowed to be dressed like this if this is Athens? They said, no, Hanum. Hanum was ma'am in Polish. Polish because my husband in Turkish. And if you were beautiful, they called you Hanum Dudu. Dudu was very beautiful lady. One of my granny's cousin was named that. Anyway. The woman says to her, no, you're in an island called Kefalonia. The ship had left. But my granny didn't give up. She took her two daughters, my grandmother Paraskevi, me. I have her name, not me. And her daughter Helen. And they tried to see what is going to happen to those Greeks that have just been left on the quay there. My granny, I don't know how many days passed, my granny Maria, she said to the girls, come with me. My grandmother had just found out she was pregnant with her second child. But there was no grandfather around, okay? He was lost at sea, they thought. And she took them to the head of the island and said to him, I want to do something here which will be able to house refugees and other islanders, and also it will have a living for me. So he said to her, you coming as a refugee with hardly any clothes on your back from Turkey. How are you going to do all this? And this is what was interesting. My great-grand said to him, wait, bring me a woman in here. You know, that she didn't want to show things to the man. So he brought a woman in, he went outside. My grandmother lifted up her clothes, my great-granny, and around her waist was meters and meters and meters of gold, thick gold rope, pure gold rope, which she had carried all these years. No one had found it, and it had grown into her skin. Literally, when she started pulling it, it started bleeding. She said to that woman, come, let's help me, someone cut so much. Take it, I want to put up a factory. So she put up a factory, my great-grandmother. Her husband, named Evangelos, had already been killed by the Chates. They were called Chateves. The killing people, the people that killed the Greeks. And she built the factory that made carpets, beautiful carpets, oriental carpets. And just so that you know, in my house and in my sister's house, and there used to be also one in my mother's house, there are carpets that were made by my granny's factory in those years. If you ask your mother or aunt or whoever is watching this video with you, it's right here by the kist. And that's how they carried on. And my first uncle, my mother's brother, and I'll just move a bit, my uncle Evangelos, was born on Cephalonian Island, to which he felt close to until he was much older. And he was going to Cephalonia and Ithaca. He even built a church in Ithaca, my uncle. He was a priest. So, I don't know how many minutes I've been talking, because I'm just trying to think. I might even have to cut this a bit. I do know that when my uncle was born, my granny, Paraskevi, still didn't know where her husband was. My grandfather was the most amazing young man you'll ever meet. He and some of his brothers had managed to escape and went to Mytilene, Lesbos Island. He had looked through the Red Cross for my granny, didn't find her, waited for 2 years, and got married to a lady called Katina. Because you know, a man's got to live, eh? But somehow they finally, after I think it was 4 years, that they met each other again. He got to the island where Kefalonia. Obviously, the poor other lady was left all alone. My grandfather was an amazing man. His name was George. Amazing. Shortish guy, very, very thin, dark guy. And first of all, he was born with a cowl over his head. So he had sixth sense. He was an empath. He was very into metaphysics. He was also a lot into religion. And he passed down his sixth sense to his children and now to his grandchildren. I have sixth sense. My sisters had sixth sense. My mother, her sister, my uncle's daughters. And funnily enough, my daughter Taryn also has. It's not nice having sixth sense. It's nice in a way, okay? Because like 2019 going into 2020, my daughter asked my husband and I on New Year's Eve, what are you going to do? So I said, nothing, we'll go to sleep. And my daughter says, but what? Are you not even going to wait for the new year and have some coffee? I said, no, because I'm feeling down. She says, Mom, you've been feeling down quite a lot lately. What is it? Is something going to go wrong in our family? Obviously, because I get these feelings. I said, no, Taryn, something bigger is coming. Something very big. And of course, by March, we knew what was coming. So I don't like knowing things are coming. I also don't like it when I see things on the side of side of my glasses here, which is amazing, because I had 3 transischemic attacks, which are small strokes, and this eye here, I have actually lost depth perception, and I can't really look through the side of my eye. So if Taryn stands this side of me, the right side of me, when I turn around, I'll walk all over her. And yet, if I'm sitting here, from the corner of my eye, I see what I am supposed to see, obviously. I've tried to block this for many, many years. But I think now, at the age of 60, it's like really going to come out. And I really don't want it because I'm poop scared. I don't want spirits. But it's okay. Until now, I've seen, there's like an angel walking down our passage. And it was someone tall wearing white. And all I could see was like golden hair and wings, all gold, like a light of gold. So my eye always catches him. He comes out of Taryn's old room and he goes towards our bathroom. And then, obviously, because I turn around and I don't see him going back where he's gone. The other day, because as you can hear, I'm one of those terrible people that tries to make jokes in the middle of everything being serious. I actually said to him, I spoke to the so-called angel. I said, listen, you seem to be going all the time into our bathroom. I do have tablets for diarrhea and vomiting. Let me know and I will leave some on the kist for you. Obviously no one answered. The one time though, the one thing that stood and looked at me from the bathroom door was black, like a shadow. Whew. Immediately I start taking the Greek incense, the prayer books, the crosses, everything, and then thank the Lord I haven't seen it again. But I don't want to see. I don't want to see spookies or anything. And I do have to see them, and it's very scary. So I'm going to leave it there where my granny found my grandfather. And I guess after there, I will also look at articles again just to check something of what I've said. And then I will also then try to start chapter 2, which would be my mother's family coming to Athens and meeting other people from Asia Minor there. I will leave that whole story because it's also a very long story and very touching story of 3 young people, very young, and the mother-in-law, who was in those years only 40, trying to make it in a new place with just the money they'd brought from the carpet factory. But I think it's time that I now say good night and try and go to sleep, because I've already had my tablets, and when you hear me going like this, then it means that I'm going to start seeing butterflies. However, I must just let you all know, sometimes I might be saying things twice, especially if I'm videotaping myself. The problem with my brain, the short memory. Remember, after the chemo, short memory problem, okay? Burn from the chemo here, front part. So there are times when I can't find words. I make mistakes and I also forget. That's why I don't come on Facebook, because I get confused if people send me messages, because I can only go one message at a time. If people send me messages, then my mind gets confused and my blood pressure goes up and I don't want another stroke. However, I do have WhatsApp and I have Viber, but actually Viber is for my overseas family, and WhatsApp is if you want to get hold of me. I think my phone number is there somewhere on my Facebook. God bless you, and if you are watching and you're my grandchild, your granny loves you forever and ever and ever. Good night.